watching the tide roll away, just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time.
Maritime Matters is brought to you live by Bahamas Maritime Connection.
What is maritime?
Maritime, simply put, relates to navigation or commerce on the high seas.
Some say money makes the world go round. I say ships move the money that make the world move.
Who navigates those large international ships?
How often are international ships required to be surveyed and inspected?
Maritime also protects our seas and borders by way of our local Bahamas Defense
It is
Force.
very sad to say that out of 1,500 plus ships that are registered under the Bahamian flag, only a very small amount of Bahamians are employed.
Maritime Matters.
And pleasant good evening to you, our valued listening audience. Welcome one. Welcome all. Welcome to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. Our producer for tonight's show is none other than Mr. Sensational himself, Mr. Craig Gibson. We're coming to you live via Love 97 FM. This is Tuesday, the 29th day of April 2025. And if it's a Tuesday, you know the deal. It's maritime ticking on matters. We encourage that if you're driving and tune in with us, please do so cautiously and ensure to take your time in getting wherever it is you are trying to get safely. As the saying goes, drive to arrive alive. Our sponsors for tonight's show are 101 Pharmacy and also Island Care Pharmacy. For all your medication needs, check out my little cuz, Shantia Heel McBride. And the lovely team at 101 Pharmacy in Nassau and Island Care Pharmacy in Freeport. Fill your prescription at the store or send your refills via the online site 1on1pharmacy.com. That's 101 Pharmacy, all lowercase, all one word, .com. The three locations are East Street South, Charles Sanders Highway, and Explorers Way in downtown Freeport. We are secondly sponsored by Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, and at BMC, we provide a full slate of ISPS maritime security services. Tonight, let's jump straight into it. We wish to discuss one of the most heated recent maritime related issues. And why is this such a heated maritime related issue? Simply because the largest maritime entity in our country is our fleet of ships by the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. Is that military or is that maritime? Well, it's paramilitary and it's paramaritime. Why do I say paramaritime? Because they're not required to comply with the international regulations like every other commercial ships. They are not commercial ships. They do not apply for hire. They are simply there to protect our borders. But they are ships. So they are maritime. And what we want to talk about our Royal Bahamas Defense Force tonight, the Commander Defense Force. Commander Defense Force. That's CDF. The rumor mill is violently spewing that the Royal Bahamas Defense Force is positioning for a change at the top. And we ain't talking about next year. We talking about next week. I agree. Don't shoot me, don't shoot the messenger. I agree that we have not seen any official statement in the press from the government or from the Defense Force. But I can assure you, based on what my boy, Mr. Laven Miller, had to say a couple of days ago, and based on what some of my good buddies, my friends, I got friends friends. I used to be in the Defense Force. I was a Defense Force officer for 18 years. And the rumor mill isn't just spewing out these things because the rumor mill can spew things. Spewing these things because they're coming from somewhere. Now, whether this actually happens, we have yet to see. But the rumor mill is spewing that there's going to be change at the top. Question: is there any criteria for one to become the top military leader in our country? Is there any criteria to become a Commodore? Because if we're talking about replacing a Commodore, then we got to know that there is somebody to replace a Commodore with. And what does that somebody have to bring to the table to become a Commodore or to replace a Commodore? What should be the focus? On identifying the best man or the best woman for such a task. Because we got females in the force too. We got females carrying the rank of captain, 4 ringers, right behind the Commodore as far as hierarchy is concerned. Right? You got the deputy Commodore, and then you got a slew of captains, some of which are females. Among the males carrying the rank of 4-ring captains. So, I can tell you that every young commissioned officer wish to become CDF someday. When I was went off to Dartmouth in Britannia Royal Naval College, we call it Dartmouth. It's in Dartmouth, Devon, England, right? When I went to Dartmouth, I didn't go to Dartmouth thinking, oh, you know, go train up. You kill yourself training, you do well, you mash it up. That's what all of us think now. When you get over there, you get a different story. Boy, look at that. That mash up plenty of us. You mash up this training, and when you reach back, you are poised and positioned to get in the ring to become Commodore of the Royal Bahamas Defense Force. The top-notch military maritime man. I wouldn't say maritime man, because we got a maritime organization known as the which one that is? Someone help me out. Maritime organization known as the BMA, Bahamas Maritime Authority. That's the top maritime organization. But the BDF is certainly the top military organization in the country. And the police is much older than the BDF, right? The police force. But the police force is not designed for combat when it comes to warlike engagements. And I dare say the Defense Force either. But the Defense Force is far more prepared than the police force when it comes to military engagements. And we know that the military arm of this country is our Royal Bahamas Defense Force. So all the young officers, and when I say officers, I am not necessarily including ratings, because the rating is on a different structure than the officers. But do not get the impression that a rating cannot become the Commodore Defense Force, because the current Commodore Raymond King, Dr. Raymond King, that is, happens to be a former rating. He started out as a Marine recruit, very, very bottom of the notch. A Marine recruit, Marine seaman, able seaman, leading seaman. Was he a petty officer? I'm not sure. But then he became an officer. And then he started from a sub-lieutenant, lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander, captain, commodore. And he covered the ranks, and he did the job, and he did it. I can tell you, my hat's off to Dr. Raymond King, because he did so well along the route. And then there was a second person that was Commodore, but they didn't start out as an officer. And that person would be a well-known, very impacting in his day as Commodore, Clifford Butch Scavella. He started out as a police recruit and eventually became a defense force recruit. And he worked his way through the ranks. Straight up to petty officer, went off to become an officer as an upper yardie, as they call it in Great Britain. But we call it a senior rate, going to convert to become an officer. And he started out just like all of us as a sub-lieutenant after he got through with his training in Dartmouth. And a lieutenant commander, Captain Commodore. So again, he was the first person that joined the Defense Force as a rating to become Commodore. Dr. Raymond King would be the second. So all the other Commodores, bar none, don't know what it is to be a rating in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force because they started out as midshipmen. Except, of course, the very first Bahamian Commodore, Commodore Leon Smith. He would have started out as a senior policeman when the Defense Force came around. So he was never a rating in the Defense Force, but of course he was started from a police recruit, and worked his way up to, I think, Chief Superintendent in the police force before he came over to the Defense Force. And when he came over to the Defense Force, I think he got the rank of Lieutenant Commander, then Commander, and then Captain, and then Commodore. So yeah, that is what we got as far as commissioned officers wishing to become the commander of the Defense Force. And most of us, when I say us, I probably could say all of us, that joined as midshipmen, we all eyed the chair of Commodore. And this is like saying somebody becomes an MP, but they don't wish to be Prime Minister. But that's nonsense. Why would you want to be in politics and not eye the top post? Well, maybe a lot of people feel like they don't have what it takes to be Prime Minister, but they think they could be an MP. But I can guarantee you if that opportunity comes, they will jump. Not only to be Prime Minister, but to be a Cabinet Minister. You have a lot of people coming in and out of politics and they don't even become a Cabinet Minister before they get out. They backbenchers all their life. And that was going on from Timbuktu days, So, like the political escalade going up into prime ministership and leader of a party in politics, we have officers in the Defense Force watching the top chair. We have officers in the police force watching the top chair. We have officers in customs, immigration, prison watching the top chair. Because if you're not watching the top chair, then why are you there as an officer with the potential to get that top chair? No, everybody want it. I don't care what you tell me. Yes, I wish I could become Commodore while I was in the force. But then, there are some realities that some of us gasp at an early stage of the game. And we realize, boy, that Commodore thing, that I thought that is not for me. And I happen to be one of those who said that Commodore thing is not for me. I am going to find an exit strategy. And before my exit strategy came to fruition, I was a senior lieutenant. When the reality hit me that Commodore post is not for me. And why would I say the Commodore post is not. I'll tell you why. Because the good book, and I'm not referring to the Bible, because when we talk of the good book, in most cases we talk about the Bible. But when I say the good book in this particular case, I'm talking about the Defense Force Act. Just like you have the Customs Act, the Police Force Act, the Immigration Act, Road Traffic Act, Port Authority Act. You name a government area and they have to have an act, or an act of parliament is what it really is, to follow through and go by. You don't just go and do what you want to do in these organizations. You have to have something written out already, which is law, that you are required to conform to and comply with. So, when you look at the Defense Force Act as a young officer, you will soon realize, I mean, if you got sense, and most of us had sense, right? You could be an officer on Defense Force, you got sense. If you could be a rating on Defense Force, you got enough sense to understand that promotions come by way of the politicians. And doesn't matter who you are. Doesn't matter who you are and how good you are and how knowledgeable you are. The politicians do not have to promote you. And you be in the Defense Force or the Police Force or Customs or immigrant, you be in one of these organizations long enough. You should realize that the politicians promote people based on their persuasion and based on the influence that the politicians would have on this individual. They're not going to put somebody to lead one of those organizations who they don't feel is going to fall in line with their agenda. And that's the way the country go. That's something that's just the way the country go. And unless we change our constitution and our laws and all the rest of that, we need to just understand that. We need to understand that the politicians appoint all heads of department in government. All of them, including permanent secretaries. And if you're not in there on their run, as we say in the streets, man, you ain't on their run. They ain't promoting you to be no leader of no entity that they need cooperation from. Even when you talk about boards in government, the Port Authority Board, the Maritime Authority Board, the Immigration Board, I ain't sure Immigration got one, excuse me, but National Insurance got one. Well, yeah, most entities got boards where they have to consider who's going to get promoted, who's going to get approval for certain things. They got boards for that. And I could guarantee you, and that's why we see every time the government changes, boy, we've been changing them left, right, and center every 5 years, eh? Over the past 20, 25 years, we've been changing them every lap. Don't know if we can change them this lap, but if it happened, who could be surprised? Those boards change when the government change. Why? Because I get too much into politics on this running. Because the government don't want somebody leading a board who's going to be a problem when they ask them or direct them to do something. And then you see the minister directs the chairman of these boards. So that's where we go with this. And before my call start coming through, let me just tie their blue cents. I ain't seen none yet. No call. Okay. So where the Commodore is being replaced, that decision comes from the cabinet of the Bahamas. It doesn't even come from the Minister of National Security, who carries out the appointment of the new Commodore. It comes from the cabinet, like just about all major government decisions come from the cabinet. The cabinet gets together and they make decisions. Doesn't even come from the House of Assembly, because the House of Assembly includes the opposition. But the cabinet are a group of ministers appointed by the Prime Minister. And these are the ones that decide who is going to be the next Commissioner of Police, who's going to be the next Commodore, the next Controller of Customs, Director of Immigration, you name it. They are the ones. And so when we start hearing, and rumors start telling us that there's going to be a change at the top of the police force or the defense force, and those two in particular, because those two are the largest ones. The police force got over 3,000 men. The defense force has close to 2,000 personnel. So those are the big positions, and those are the ones that are watched very, very closely. But you know, when you become Commodore, that you are on a 5-year contract. That's the time that the contract should either roll over or have you replaced. It's something like how we change the government every 5 years, or how the government got to come back to us every 5 years to try and get re-elected or try and get elected, whatever the case may be. So we're in a situation here where that 5 years is about to be up. And the politicians now got to decide whether the current Commodore is going to get an additional 5 years, or whether they're going to appoint somebody that they want to be Commodore for the next 5 years. And rumor has it that the conclusion is that they're not going to reappoint the existing Commodore for another 5 years. Strong rumors. I see nothing in the papers. But like everything else in this country, in our country, the rumor can be very strong. So, the history of Commodores in our defense force, it started out with a British chap that was in the Royal Navy, still assigned to the Royal Navy, came over on secondment, but his rank was Commander William Swinley. And of course, Commander Swinley worked, he was placed in the office of the Prime Minister, and he worked to put everything together to start what we know today as a defense force. And really and truly, really all of this is a Coast Guard, but we call it a defense force. And Mr. Swinley drew on his military knowledge by being a commander in the Royal Navy. So you're a little jokey fella. You're not just going to be a commander in the Royal Navy unless you have some substance, Because unlike, well, I shouldn't say unlike the Bahamas, we got some commanders that, some people don't think they really should have been commanders to begin with. But that's neither here nor there, because their politics may be right. Unlike politics, the influence that politics have in the Bahamas when it comes to people being promoted in the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the Royal Navy is not as steeped, because you're talking about millions of people as opposed to thousands of people. Great Britain has 70 million people. And from that lot, the military has only about 1%, if all that, maybe 0.5% of that 70 million people. So, not many people in the Royal Navy would know or be related directly to a politician. Not many people in the Royal Navy, the politician would know them by name and sight. Very, very few, because of how vast that country is. And even if a politician may know you, they may not know you well enough to swing you through the system, because there's only one politician knowing you. And that system is not small and compact like ours. So in our country, there's a lot of politics playing when it comes to who's going to get that top military post, who's going to get that top police post, and every other head of department. A lot of politics. And we have seen over the years, without even paying much attention, we have seen that almost every time the government changes, the Commissioner of Police changes. Almost every time the government changes, the Commodore Defense Force changes. The Controller of Customs changes. The Director of Immigration changes. The Director of Prison changes. We've seen this over and repeatedly. So we need to get with the understanding and the knowledge that in all these situations, in the Act, it states in clear writing that appointment to positions higher than a certain rank in the Defense Force is lieutenant, senior lieutenant. Anything, if you want to become a lieutenant commander in the Defense Force, that appointment has to come from the politicians, because they say by political appointment. It tells you that. So don't go around making noise. Oh, I was driving bigger ships than that fellow. Lucky go and get promoted and they promote me. What is your politics? Is what you should ask yourself. Who run you on? Because that fellow may be on a run where he's the point man for cabinet minister while he was doing his campaigning. And if I am a lieutenant and I am the chief, what you call the thing in politics? I don't do politics. I don't know. You know me. I just swing voter. Don't look for me to be on nobody's side, because boy, I can lay it on, right? But the chief fella who's in charge of galvanizing the group who's trying to get this person elected may be a sub-lieutenant. But after that person is elected and that person becomes a cabinet minister because of his popularity or her popularity, one call to the Minister of National Security, say, look here, that's my general, that's what they call him, that's my general. He has to get promoted every lap. As a matter of fact, let him skip 1 or 2 ranks. And then we see, all of a sudden, this fellow, who we know can't ride with next fella's slippers, getting all kind of promotion when certain government in place. And the fellow who, much better than him, as we all know on the Defense Force, ain't hardly moving. Because why? He is nobody's general. He is nobody. No politician know him. And he ain't trying to get in politics. So he ain't gonna position himself for upward movement. Because everything according to the Act says that by political appointment. So the Commodore could recommend you much as he like. And don't recommend the next fellow. When that list come down, the next fella still get a promotion over you. Now I live that life, so ain't nobody could tell me. When it comes to nepotism and politics, the defense force and the police force, they are steeped and mad with those things. So if you think because you are a very good police, you got your degree, you hit the beat, and you no nonsense, you don't play with nobody, you make sure your reports, you ain't corrupt, and you think that can get you promoted to the higher ranks, man, you better think again. You better go try side with somebody who could say, even if you're in a general, you have favor to get promoted. Because those other set who side with people, they be getting promoted left, right, and center over you. Anyway, we don't want to talk too much about promotion. We don't want to talk too much about politics. But boy, we surely want to talk about this position as Commander Defense Force. That's the CDF. We're not talking about just a Commodore. Because, anyway, we can talk about that too. Could you be a Commodore and not be the CDF? We can talk about that. And I hope all of my Defense Force people tuned in tonight. And if you know anybody on the Defense Force, please call them and tell them, tune in, because this is going deep. And I want them to call in if they have guts. Anyway, we got a call on the line now. Caller, you on Maritime Matters. Good night.
Hello, Captain Bain. How you doing?
Top shape. Who's that?
It's Captain G. My brother.
Boy, G, one thing I can depend on you, because see, you know more about these things than me. What you saying, man?
No, but man, what you just explained is exactly correct.
Thank you very much.
And talking about leadership and appointments to leadership, and I think if those of us in the different services understand that, it'll probably ease a lot of frustration. Just like you said, when you join an organization, you aspire, if you have any kind of aspiration, but you aspire to be the top.
That's right.
That's just natural, right?
That's natural. Yeah.
Yeah, but and I use my two brothers as example.
Right.
I was a senior officer in the Defense Force. My brother John is the Deputy Commissioner of Police.
Right.
My brother Charles is the Deputy Superintendent of Prisons. Mm-hmm. But we never made it to the top.
Never made it to the top. Well, you always be at BOF and them.
I tell you this much, one thing about my father, tell all of us, yeah? you trade on your merit. You understand? And that makes it easier to accept. If you know your capabilities, but you are not put in the position at the top, you have to understand that is a political decision.
Yeah, because if it was on merits, I don't think I would ever leave the force.
Exactly, and you must accept that.
Yes, sir. That's what the book says.
Yeah, and I think, like I said, if we who are in the top echelon of these law enforcement agencies I use, things like that, then I think it'd be easier to stomach when somebody else is mind you.
Yeah.
As humans,
yeah.
You feel it when you know that you have the capability to do something, and somebody else is pushing over you.
Yeah, man, that hurts, man. That hurts.
Don't have as much capability as you.
Yeah, because I feel hurt. You're doing your best and you're doing better when it comes to performance than other people, and you see people getting promoted who even ain't trying to perform over you. That hurts.
Yes, yeah, it does. But what you do as a big man, as an officer, what you do is you try your best to make that person successful.
That's after you finish crying.
Yeah. After the event, your family and your keep. Yeah. You try your best because it's all about the organization, or it ought to be all about the organization.
I agree.
But I just thought I'd chime in and say that, man. Because what you were saying is spot on.
Thank you very much, my friend. Well, I'm gonna go deeper once we come back off the break. I'm so happy to hear somebody like you who was a senior. I mean, you was next to the top. You was next to Commodore. Yeah. And people need to understand that if you saying yes, this is the way it is, at some stage you must have realized that performance is one thing, but influence has a lot more to do with these appointments than,
of course.
All right, so well, thank you so much, Chief, and thank you for continuing to listen, my friend.
Yeah, okay, no problem.
Thank you. Okay, now we got another call on the line. I see you. I hope that's another senior officer, probably from the police force this time, or the prison. Calling you on Maritime Matters. Hello.
Definitely BDF, my brother. Definitely.
Captain Brain.
Do not mix me up. Good afternoon, Captain Brain. This is Captain Brain.
Yes, Captain Brain. It's all good, my friend. I'm in top shape and getting better all the time. How are you?
Man, I am great, man.
I know you had your little times to cry in the force.
Oh, I did some crying. I got some stories I could tell.
I know, right?
But I heard Godfrey earlier.
Yeah.
And Godfrey made the point that once you understand the reality, you do your best to support the guy at the top. And while I agree with him 1,000,000%, the reality is in this country there is a disconnect, in my opinion, between what the politicians want and what the country and the force needs.
Yeah, but the law says political appointments, and we can't get out of that.
Well, yeah, but fine. You get the appointment if you align in the right direction, and that's okay. But when you talk about these institutions, this whole business, and the reality is your politics play a significant role in when you get a particular rank. But it is in this country, it has gone too far. Really and truly, the politicians just don't understand the devastating effect that some of the things that they do impact on the entire these organizations. And that's why people aren't so productive, and that's why morale is so low in some of these government entities, like police force, prison, customs. You talk to every and anybody. It's a problem because people are when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs and the like, self-actualization is at the pinnacle, and people want to you feel like though you want to progress, and when we have these decisions that nobody can understand, all because of politics. I call it politics.
That's what it is.
I just believe that the government and the politicians need to do better.
But why should they care? Why should they care?
It manifests itself. Let me just finish this point. It manifests itself in many different ways. For example, you mentioned earlier these boards, right? There's nothing can be done in this country because this whole business of you being a general and you get appointed to the board, you're not the right person to have in that position. That's why there's so much stagnation in this country, because we are acquiescing to stupidity. If I wanted, I mean that's the best word I could choose to describe it, is stupidity. Here it is, we want a productive and a progressive country, but we're not doing the things that are necessary for this to take place.
Yeah, but does the politicians want a progressive country? Or they just want to have their way while they're in power? I'm not sure they want a progressive country. I mean, look right now at our energy crisis. We got all the solar in the world and they're trying to go LNG. I don't think they want a progressive country.
Like they say, at the end of the day, the politicians make the decisions, right? But we as Bahamians, we need to be in a position where we can collectively, because I think that's what makes things happen. We can collectively, no man, we don't want that. What you're pushing down my throat is not steak. That's some other than steak, and I'm not going to swallow that. And I think Bahamians just need to hold the elected officials to account for some of the decisions that are made in this country.
Yeah, but Captain Brain, we've had protests over and repeatedly called in this country. Have you been the one?
No.
Well, see, that's the problem. If you who talking this, if you who talking this have never been to protests, then who's going to go to the protests?
I haven't been to any, and I can tell you, in all honesty, one of the reasons, and this is not something that justifies it. One of the reasons I haven't been, because I just didn't have no confidence that there was going to be any meaningful change, or how steep steep in corruption this country really is.
Yeah, but it can't be done unless we get the numbers. And if people like you who are preaching out against and saying that the only way we can address it is to come to a collective and put out protests so that we can put pressure on the government. But if we have protests being called and people ain't coming out, the government realize we're serious.
Well, you're absolutely correct, and a lot of people like myself have not been to any of the protests, and I suspect that our protest is at the ballot boxes, right?
But we've never had not even 1%.
Really and truly, and you're absolutely right. Bahamians need to get together, me included, and we need to hold the politicians accountable. We need to tell them, well, hey, we're not satisfied with this aspect or that aspect, and we want it done in different, and we want it done in a better way. And so, yeah, I fall on the sword in that regard, right? And I just think that this whole country, when it comes to how we do business, we are all and I said we.
Oh, I know you used to speak French.
You know, we have not. We can't organize. Not us. We too interested in each other, in ourselves. We can't organize, and we can't collectively agree on much things.
So what is your view?
Our politics is ahead of every sensible thought in our head.
What is your view on changing the Commodore after 5 years?
Well, I mean, to be honest, right? I think entities like the military, the police force, and those type of organizations, I don't subscribe to changing the Commodore every 5 years, right?
How long would you recommend?
I subscribe to the position of you change the Commodore when and if he or she is no longer effective in the rank with a maximum time frame as if the act doesn't speak to a maximum time frame, but you could if 5 years is what is enacted, and then 5 years it is. But
yeah, that's a policy.
I don't subscribe to every 5 years you must change the Commodore, because a lot of things, the Commodore may have started that. I mean, granted, it can be continued by his successor, but I just believe it should all be based on how well he's performing at that particular time. And so I don't think it needs to be automatic. Of course,
yeah, who's going to be the judge? Who's going to be the judge of his performance, though? Because the only people who could move him is the politicians.
The people who appoints the Commodore.
But that's the politicians.
The cabinet and the Security Council.
Yeah, but what do they know? What do they know of a Commodore's mandate and performance? How could they're not in a position? You and I and Godfrey and people like Don Ware, Roger Roll, Albert, we may be able to say, oh, this Commodore is kind of weak, or this Commodore is very good, because we know what Commodore is supposed to be doing. But those politicians don't have a clue.
I beg to disagree on that.
You think they have a clue?
If there are benchmarks that the government wishes to achieve during a particular tenure for a particular Commodore, I think those are the things that you have to measure them against. And then,
yeah, but you can't do that, because the government is changing. If the government is changing every 5 years.
Yeah, but how effective he or she is with respect to the mandate of the defense force. The mandate of the defense force is, well, protect the territorial integrity of the Bahamas, deal with all the situation regarding drugs and poaching and all them other stuff.
Yeah, but what happened if I'm Prime Minister and my nephew is the captain and I want to make him Commodore? Although this Commodore doing well, I want to make my nephew Commodore. What you think I could be concerned about how well he doing?
Well, Darren, that is my point. I think that it needs to be based, the whole changing of the guard needs to be based on how well that individual is performing against the set standard that the government or the Security Council set for a Commodore. And so And so those are the things that, just like how I'm a division, when I was in the Defense Force, I was a divisional officer. I had to write on cause my subordinates to either be promoted or not promoted, and that was based on whether or not they performed their duties in accordance with what the requirement for that particular rate or rank was. Then similarly,
and even in the Defense Force, when you do that, the nepotism kick in where, oh, this one have his sweetheart son who he's in a position now to do it. He's going to make sure that one is promoted. This is going to make sure that one's so your fellow who you know working on your boat and works so well, works better than everybody else on all the other boats, didn't get the permission, the promotion, because some of the more senior officers push in some of the people who they know, and the nepotism. Now you know in the Defense Force that nepotism kind of strong.
Well, that's kind of strong. It's extremely strong, and I have experienced it in the past and whatnot. And we know when I speak about the corruption aspect of the organization, as I will have articulated earlier, that's what I was talking about, right? People gonna give their people gonna look out for their people, and that is the kind of synonymous with this country, and is not right. It's time for us to really look at it and say, you know something, these type of organizations, you need to, as far as practicable, deal with people on their merit, and the military and a lot of the uniform branches, everything, the military makes it very easy for everybody, because all the laws, all the requirements, everything is documented. Everything is right. There's no ambiguity.
No, I'm not sure. There's a criteria. Is there a criteria to become Commodore on the Defense Force if you're already commissioned officer? Is there a criteria that the politicians are required to go by in making that appointment? I don't think there's any criteria.
Well, I do not know. I know.
No, I don't know. That's why I'm saying. If I don't know and you don't know, and I don't think Godfrey knows, I don't think there's any written criteria as to what a person got to bring to the table to even be considered or eligible to be a Commodore. The only criteria is by political appointment. That's the criteria.
The point that I'm really making is that maybe there is no criteria, right?
No, there's none.
The facts of the matter, there ought to be some benchmark that
some minimum requirements
which Commodores are by, so that you could determine, firstly, if he is suitable to be a Commodore. Secondly, if he would have done all the things that are necessary to put him in a position to direct and grow the organization. And thirdly, if he or she would have been would be something that will command the respect of the masses in the force, because there are people who are appointed to positions, and if they can't command the respect of those around them, then they are failure before they start.
So let me ask you, what do you think on that list of criteria? What would you say one of those things ought to be? I'll tell you two. Let me tell you two what I have, right? Because I had time to think, but this stuff might throw at you off the cuff, right? I think a defense force is an organization with millions of dollars worth of ships, millions of dollars worth of potential with men and women. The job of the defense force is to make sure that these people are patrolling our borders in an efficient and effective way by way of the engineers on board and the deck persons on board. So if you're going to make a Commodore who is basically charged with ensuring that we get efficiency out of those ships, I think that person should have at least served as captain or chief engineer on board a ship. That's the simple, easy one for me. Because you're making people Commodore. Look at all our Commodores in the past. Come on, man. Foolishness.
I'm not sure if
serving as captain or chief engineer really and truly ought to be the standard. But what I can say, when you look at that individual and his potential to be the Commodore, that individual needs to have a good understanding of the organization and what the requirements are from a legislative standpoint, what the Defense Force ought to be doing. And when you mention patrolling the waters of the Bahamas and boarding and making I remember when I was in the force, we used to board like 200-300 vessels on a patrol.
When you came up under me, you had to do that.
I am advised. I'm not there, so I can't say emphatically or 100%. But I understand that the people go to sea and never make an arrest and never do boardings and the like. So those are the kind of things that. And then when you look at the force as a whole, when you look from where the Commodore sits, and you look at all the vessels that are laid up and I just don't understand. I think that we need to rethink what accountability should fall at the feet of the Commodore, what should fall at the feet of the base engineering officer, what should fall at the feet of the squadron commanding officer. But ultimately, everything falls at the feet of the Commodore. And if these things ain't working, these people aren't doing what they ought to be doing. If every ship, if you have a boneyard of ships that ought to be sailing, that's not sailing, if you have nobody making no arrests and not being as effective as he could, then the Commodore, then you need to really look at this Commodore and say, hey man, what you guys doing?
Well, that's what we've been doing all along. To a certain point, we've had people at the helm who doesn't even understand what it really is to be on board a ship, a patrol boat at sea, doing the job the Defense Force supposed to be doing. But we're making them Commodores.
But if you give somebody a document and say, this is the mandate of the Defense Force, and it's there, it's written, everything is laid out, black and white, and that exists today. If you say, well, this is the Defense Force, this is a job that you're tasked.
The Defense Force has a mandate. What you mean? If
you don't need to be on a ship to look at the mandate and say, am I protecting the territorial integrity of the Bahamas? Am I stopping these illegal migrants from flowing into this country unabated? Am I stopping people from these foreigners from poaching and
yeah, but you need to have been on a ship to understand what it takes to do that.
We could very easily manage that, right?
I don't believe you could very easily manage that. If you end up in a force with a bunch of ships within running, unless you get somebody who understand what it takes to cause a ship to be able to run. No, you can't just put somebody who know nothing but running a ship or know nothing but a ship running, because your whole mandate has to be premised on keeping those ships running, keeping those ships from going aground, keeping those machines going. Man, come on, you can't just put somebody there and say, oh, they can no, that's nonsense. That's why in the real world. No, let's look at the real world. Your real maritime world where you're dealing with ships. You cannot be an officer on board a ship unless you meet certain criteria. Defense Force shouldn't be no different.
And we go right back full circle. It goes back to who is the Commodore accounting to on a daily basis.
He's responsible for making sure that fleet of ships are working.
Is his political masters acquiring expectation is for him to talk a good talk?
No, anybody could talk a good talk, but anybody can't have served as captain or chief engineer on a ship. That's why when you're saying you're going to make somebody a Commodore, you make sure that person been through the trenches, man.
Yeah, but while I might agree that having gone through the trenches makes you put you in a better position to be able
put you in a position, period. In a position, period.
What that role and title, or when your BEO come to you and say, well, Chief, the all these boats are down and I can't do nothing, right? As the Commodore, I don't need to be the BEO. I have a BEO. I have a competent BEO. What will it take to get these boats up and running? Then my job as the Commodore then would be to say, you know something, Mr. Politicians, this is my mandate that you gave me. This is where we are. This is how many boats we have. This is where I need to get them boats running. And invariably, it boils down to dollars and cents and the government's priority.
No, it boils down to being prepared
to influence government policy.
Well, government policy is one thing that we cannot do anything about, right? What I'm talking about is what we can do something about. We can ensure that if you want that force, which is really a fleet of ships, to be in a position where they can readily continue their mandate by ensuring that those ships are properly maintained and properly managed and properly navigated and all the rest of that, you need professional people to do it. You can't just, you remember when Defense Force was spent over $200 million on the Sandy Bottom project, and there was heightened looking for people to be captains of those ships. You would know that in our force, the Defense Force, we had captains who couldn't even navigate.
Yeah.
But now what you think of that? How can you make the man captain of a ship and he don't even know when a ship can run aground?
Well,
that's foolishness.
At the end of the day, we historically, even when I was there, we keep allowing the standard to slip.
They ain't allowed the standard to slip. We were doing a bunch of. See, the reality is,
we allowed the standard to slip.
Okay.
And right now, really and truly, I don't know whether or not I even recognize the Defense Force when juxtaposed to what it was in the past. I don't even know if I recognize this organization. And everybody I would have spoken with, everybody say, boy, things have changed so
yeah, the standards have
for
dropped.
The worse.
The standards
Nobody
have dropped.
says,
Yeah.
boy, we improve or we grown or we this and that. Everybody say, boy, wish we had them old fellas back here who could keep the standard up, because right now it's I don't know, the best word. It's just a problem, and so.
But you gotta understand why people left. Why people like you and I left the force. Why Dornwell, Ken Turnquest, James Wallace, Harvey Sweeten. We could call big names, right? Boyd Williams. Why they left?
Well,
they left because of the same nepotism and politics we talking about.
And nepotism
and politics
very high up there in terms of what was happening at the time, and it just wasn't. It was not a feel good feeling to be in a position where you working and you contributing and clearly you carrying out the mandate of the force, and John Doe or Harry Joe just aligning him or herself with a particular with politicians and seemingly and definitely not seemingly definitely moving ahead of you and I remember a story. I don't want to relate that story, but we've had some situations where and I think the politicians are
let's hear the story, man.
Politicians are destroying these organizations.
Yeah, well, of course.
To understand that these organizations are built on discipline and are built on set rules and regulation and set ways of doing things. And when you deviate from these military norms and whatnot, it creates lots and lots and lots of problems.
Maybe our problem is we have politicians who are kind of off. We got crooked politicians. We got corrupt politicians. We have that based on what we have experienced in the past. This country is riddled with politicians that really are not as upright as we would want them to be, eh?
Upright? Come on, man. You're scaring me, Glenn. You know why? Because I like I've said on numerous occasions on your show.
Yeah.
In the Crime Commission, I think it's 1984. Drexel Gomez, I think, was headed that commission, and they concluded that the Bahamas is endemically corrupt from top to bottom. So I don't know what your expectations are. Why are you having these expectations? Having all the data and all the analyses to show that we have a problem.
Yeah, we have a problem, but you seem
resolved.
You still seem to think. But you still seem to think that we can rescue the ship.
Well, I think if we start start one organization at a time and say, you know something?
You mean one politician at a time? you can't jump on an organization. The organization are what it is because the politicians are not doing the right thing.
Yeah, but if we are a group of politicians, we agree that. But you know something, boy, we're gonna not exert our influence over, or we're gonna lessen our exertion of dictates.
Or we can put criteria in place for appointments.
Yeah, or we're gonna create a commission that, or a grouping of people like the Security Council that's gonna oversee certain aspects as they ought to be doing.
But who said they ain't gonna be corrupt?
Organization.
Who said they ain't gonna be corrupt?
Well, you're
right back to corruption, my brother. You need criteria. You shouldn't have a person come through the defense force as a doctor and he joined as a commander, then he became captain and he's in line to be commodore and he's never set foot on a ship. That should never happen.
No, I agree with you.
So you need criteria.
Right? It's just a matter of, we have to decide what we want as a country. We have so much of these anomalies. It's just scary, man. We have to decide what we want as a country. We got to hold our politicians to account for some of the decisions that they make. Everything that they make, isn't always the right decision. And I go back to the various boards that are elected. If we want to grow this country, we need to put the right people in the right places, and so that things can start to move. It may be slow at first, or whatever the case may be, but let's start somewhere, for God's sake.
Well, you better be on the right ticket. If you want them to put the right people, those right people, the qualified right people, better be on their ticket, because they ain't doing it. They don't care about what you could bring to the table. They don't care about how well this country could improve. Their thing is they giving back to their cronies.
Yeah.
Right?
No, of course.
So we need to understand, first of all, that because if you look at all of these departments, people who are in charge or senior people in immigration, senior people in customs, senior people in defense force, senior people in maritime authority, senior people in port department, how many of them ever end up on boards? The board that they are professional in.
Very, very few.
If any.
Yeah.
If any.
Very few, if any. I agree.
And so if the government is not going to see to it that, look, we can have at least 2 people on each one of these boards with experience in that area, because I've been in numerous areas, and if they ask me to do it, they can't ask me now because I don't know. They I don't know how it go. I ain't even interested in being on the board, right? You can't get me on the board.
Yeah.
You can't get me in politics. I ain't fighting that fight, right? I a little old for that now. I gotta get me now. I don't do my sacrifices.
If you put on a t-shirt and you go and scream and get 2 pom-poms on the rally, you never know.
Oh, no. I get all the rallies. I ain't scared of no rally. I love them. That'll be plenty fun and they plenty laugh. And I like to hail people. I ain't got no problem getting rallies.
Yeah.
Call I see on the line. Captain Brain.
And you got to put on your pom-pom and you got to make lift the protector cannon up onto the stage. If you do that, you will be on the board tomorrow.
These people ain't want to hear me to talk forever. Somebody call in. Let me get to that line and feel free to call back.
Accommodating, my brother.
Thank you so much, my brother.
Bye-bye.
Calling on Maritime Matters. Hello.
Hey, again.
Yeah, hey, G.
I had to call back.
Yeah, man.
On one thing, you said about the burn. Now, when you and Herbie was discussing, now I agree, politicians have to take their licks, eh?
Mm-hmm.
But Glenn, what messes up a whole lot of our organizations is our own colleagues within the organizations,
Well, we have that undermining and pulling down to get ahead of this one going on. But we know that the defense force that played a big role in messing up the defense force.
Yeah, and that is a serious problem. You know what I mean? If you're an organization, you have to be trying to be as united as possible.
No, G, no boy, not them.
You know,
you got daggers.
Yeah.
If you're an organization like Defense Force,
I just wanted to make that comment. That, you know, sometimes we are our own worst enemies.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But now, if you know somebody got a post through nepotism or through favoritism or politics, how are you going to respect that person?
Yeah,
how are you going to be trying to help that person? You know they don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's difficult as a human being. It's difficult.
Yeah.
To make that, you know, but
that's why you had to find the door.
Yeah, but you know, as a good Christian man, I say, listen, put those things behind you and just wait to make the organization better.
But you could turn your face and get slapped on the next side. I can't do that.
I understand that, brother. Okay, just call to make that comment.
Yeah, G. Thank you so much, man. You take care. We'll keep in touch.
Okay, brother.
All right, sir. Yeah, that's a senior man. He was next. That one was almost coming off. I don't know if politics must do him in, but it is what it is, you know. And Captain Herbert Brain, he was one of the sharpest officers that force ever saw. I say one of them now because, you know, I don't want to hear it smell too much. But again, because of politics and nepotism, he decided to get out. A lot of us didn't want to leave, you know. But after we see the way things really go, and like Godfrey and I discussed earlier, we saw exactly how the land lay. We realized, boy, look here, I don't know if I want to be part of this. This ain't making no sense. And these people could turn things around the way they want, put incompetent people in place, and not only the politicians, the senior officers doing that too. And so, well, I want to say something real bad, but I better stay out of that. You know, after the females came in the force, oh my goodness. Man, everything that's turned cat guts. But you know, we have good females. We have not so good females. We have good males, we have not so good males. And between politics and senior officer nepotism in that defense force, and I dare also say the police force. And I want y'all police to feel free to call in now. Y'all ain't got to be scared. Call in and let us know what you feel about this type of thing going on in these organizations. Customs, call in. Don't be shy. We know because we feeling it. Well, I don't feel it no more. And I can never feel it no more because I stand far from those things where political influence has their way. Right? And I want not to do none of them. And that's my take. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. As you can see, we had a long run before we took a break. So we're going to take our first and only break because we only got minutes left. And when we return, we will a little deeper on this church show, a little more on this stuff, boy. But it's really a lot to swallow in one show. But we can see what we can do. Thank you very much. Stand by the back.
At Bahamas Maritime Connection Limited, we offer first-class maritime security services throughout the Bahamas and the wider Caribbean. As experts in maritime security, we specialize in production of ISPS assessments and plans, verification audits, certified familiarization training, and port security consultancy, just to name a few. Our services also include provision of a security force to maintain all required ISPS facility security compliance. For all your maritime security needs, visit us today in Nassau at our East Street South location or in Freeport in the Kipling Building. Call us at 392-3515 or follow us on all social media platforms. Bahamas Maritime Connection, your leader in maritime security. Let's help you make the connection. At One-on-One Pharmacy, our friendly staff is ready to serve you. Visit us today for all your prescription and over-the-counter needs at our East Street South or Charles Saunders Highway locations. We're open Monday through Saturday from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. and from 9 to 4 on Sundays. In a rush? Send your refill scripts online at oneononepharmacy.com or ask about our convenient pickup service. One-on-One Pharmacy, providing personal health care with people at heart.
Love 97. It's a great feeling.
Sitting in the morning sun, I I'll be sitting when the evening comes, watching the ships roll in. Then I'll watch them roll away again. Yeah. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Georgia, headed for Frisco.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. You're listening to Maritime Matters. I am your host, Captain Glenn Bain. My producer for the night, the extraordinaire himself, Mr. Craig Gibson. And we are discussing the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, more specifically, the post of the Commander Defense Force. We've had a few calls. Rumor mill has it that that post is about to experience a position change or changeover, and the existing Commodore, or should I say Commander Defense Force, well, he's Commodore, he's Commander Defense Force, because they only have one Commodore at this time, is apparently, according to the rumor mill, very strong rumor mill, on the way out, and another senior officer would be marching in. And we want to know, is there a criteria for the appointment of a Commodore? We know that there are mandates, but those mandates are not clearly written out, eh? Is there a criteria? And based on all that I know from being in the Defense Force as an officer, and some of the people that were in the Defense Force even longer than I was, there doesn't seem to be any criteria to be appointed Commodore, or to be appointed almost anything in the Defense Force, right? As far as officers are concerned. Now, ratings, they have criteria. They got to do the leading seaman course, they got to do the senior rates course, they got to do leadership course, they got to do this course. That's for ratings. But for officers, and you just get promoted. And some people know, as we say in the Bahamas, you don't wait pump. When they look around, you get all kind of stripes on the shoulders. Because you are favored. You're favored by way of politics, or you're favored by way of nepotism of the senior officers in the force. And ain't nothing we could do with that, because that's a goner. That ain't gonna change. Unless a list of criteria is put in place for all ranks, particularly Commodore. And I say particularly Commodore because my thing is, how are you going to have somebody at the top of an organization and they don't really understand the details of what this organization is doing or is required to be doing? How could you have a Commodore who has never once served on a ship as captain, who has never served on a ship as chief engineer? And I say captain and chief engineer because all ships have captains and chief engineers. And if you haven't done or played those roles, how could you understand the details of what people are required to do who are playing those roles? The Defense Force as it is really a coast guard with a fleet of ships. And the person at the top should be able to ensure that those ships are properly managed from the engineering perspective and from the deck perspective, as far as being properly navigated, and you should want not only the person at the top of the Defense Force, but the government officials themselves. They should want that anytime you are putting somebody in charge of one of those ships, even as a navigating officer, because those ships cost millions of dollars each. And if a navigating officer is not qualified to navigate a vessel at that size commercially, that vessel is exposed to running aground. If an engineering officer or rating in the engine room is not certified to the extent or to the minimum requirements of that counterpart engineer in the real world or the commercial maritime world based on the STCW code, then we don't know if those engine rooms are being properly maintained, or if the people who are doing it even know how to properly maintain those engine rooms. And I can tell you that all my years, my whole 18 years in the Defense Force, well, I spent 18 on ships. And my boy, Captain Herbie Brain, probably would have spent 20 on ships. My boy, Brother G. Roll, who called in Godfrey, Godfrey didn't like boats. Godfrey, I shouldn't say that, but you're right. Godfrey will work. He work plenty boats now, boy. But he can tell you, I don't sail. I don't like sailing, but I done it because this way they put me, and he would get the job done, right? But the reality is, in all of our years, there was not one commissioned officer on board any of those ships that served as an engineer. We didn't send people to England to be engineers, not in the officer capacity. But yet, every single Coast Guard cutter, every single Royal Navy ship has officers with stripes, commanders, lieutenant commanders, captain, wearing those stripes in the engine room as engineering officers. Every single tanker, every single container ship, every single car boat, any ship you see out there operating internationally having a registration has at least 2 officers in their engine room. A chief officer and a chief engineer and a second engineer. And then they can have 1 or 2 reading forming part of an engineering watch, whether it be a wiper, or oiler, or whatever. But they must have officers in that engine room or responsible for that engine room, just the way they have captain and mate responsible for navigating the ship and taking care of all the safety measures of the ship and all the rest of that. Because the ship really does 2 things. It has to be navigated, and the machinery got to operate. And those are equal, because you can't navigate if the machinery breaks down. And that's the reason why internationally ships have to carry a master, a chief mate, and then a navigating officer in some cases, in most cases, now officer forming part of navigation watch. And the engine room carries equivalently, or when you juxtapose the engine they carry the chief engineer, the second engineer, and the engineer watch officer. Just like you have a deck watch officer, you have an engineer watch officer for the engine and for the machinery. And they are equally paid almost. The captain and the chief engineer make almost the same thing. The chief mate and the second engineer makes almost the same pay. And they have the same type qualification. So why in our defense force you don't have 1 commissioned officer as an engineer ever working in that engine room? Well, I take that back. I think from time to time they had one or 2 that worked when they were junior officers in the engine room, but not as senior officers. We have the senior officers in the engineering department responsible for ensuring that the engineering in the Defense Force is being maintained efficiently. And a lot of them have even been in the engine room. And we had a whole Commodore who's supposed to be an engineer and never been in the engine room as an engineer officer. And I can tell you that because I know. So, I am saying to you today, if we're going to make somebody Commodore of a fleet of ship that's larger than any other fleet in our country, the biggest maritime organization in our country when it comes to ships owned by the country. I don't think even no private, we got marine tankers, well, they ain't even marine tankers no more, but they said that go to the family island and carry fuel out of Clifton Pier and all the rest of that. They don't have half the amount of ships the Royal Bahamas Defence Force have. But guess what? Every single one of the ships have a chief engineer in the engine room. Every single one of them ships have a second engineer. Every single one has a captain who's qualified commercially, that prove himself, that pass the course. Everyone have a mate. Come on, man. Why do you think their ships don't break down like us? Check Tropical Shipping Fleet. Check Betty K. Check any one of these international ships in and out of the Bahamas. See how much time they break down and compare that with the Defense Force ships. See how much time they run aground. They compare that with the Defense Force ships. You know why? Because they have certified people on those ships. And somebody can tell me Defense Force should not have certified people before they make appointment to run those ships? Excuse me, we'll need some water on that one. No, that ain't the way it should be, people. That ain't the way it should be. Now, these commercial ships, to certify on those ships, they came from what the military, the Navy, used to do to keep their ships going at sea when they have to fight war. That's where they got most of their practices and principles and concepts from. But now we get a group of ships like our Defense Force. And if you compare us with the U.S. Coast Guard, or the Canadian Coast Guard, or the Australian Coast Guard, or the British Coast Guard, we lost. I can remember when the Americans, the U.S., gave us 4 ships that they decommissioned after 30 years old. And those ships were running better than some of our ships in the Defense Force that wasn't even 10 years old yet. For many years. Because they would have had qualified people in their engine rooms. They would have qualified people on their deck. Those ships never run aground. Those ships never break down. Because they would do what you call preventive maintenance, not what do we call it? Fix it as you go. What the name is we call the thing? Breakdown maintenance. They have real mechanics, not mechanots, as we always say in Defense Force. So use a mechanic, man, use a mechanot. I mean, you ain't know what you're doing with the tool in your hand. Anyway, our time is firing down. Did I say goodnight to my Annie Mae? Oh boy, Annie Mae, I apologize. I did not say goodnight to Auntie Mae. So I say tonight, good night, Auntie Mae. That's my number 1 fan. 92 years and going strong up there in Freeport. And yes, I say to you, the number to call. Oh, time gone. I haven't even to call the number. We had 2 calls, thank goodness. 4 calls, thank goodness again. And I just want to say that tonight's show really was about a wake-up call. And what we didn't get to tonight is about what's going to happen when May 10th comes around. We know that May 10th, it's a day when the HMBS Flamingo was bombed by the Cubans using Russian MiG jets. And 4 men lost their lives during that process. Who were there? Defending our country. And other men had grazes on them. Some had mental scars that's still on them. And what this country did for them. What reparation did we do for them? What recognition did we do for them? We put them on a little list. We ain't named no streets after them. We ain't built no replica where tourists could go and visit and teach them. We should have a whole museum on that incident. Anyway, 1 minute left. let me wind down. Ladies and gentlemen, you have been listening to Maritime Matters. On this show, we talk maritime. Tonight, we discuss the Royal Bahamas Defense Force, the fact that the Commodore, according to all the rumors and according to how things seem to be panning out, is going to be replaced real soon, sometime next week is the information I have. And also, what are the criteria for Commodore? We've had a few calls, my good friend Captain Herbie Brain, my good friend Captain Godfrey Roll. And we thank you, our listener, for tuning in and listening to our show. My producer for the night was none other than the great, sensational Mr. Craig Gibson. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we wrap up and say, Maritime Matters, tick, 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 out.
So I'm just gonna sit on a dock of the bay, watching the tide